It's the news that residents along the Gulf Coast did not want to hear. Hurricane George is slowing down and strengthening. Welcome to Weather Center. I'm Dave Schwartz.
And I'm Warren Madden. Boat owners are preparing for the storm all along the Gulf Coast, including Pensacola, Florida. Those who can't remove their vessels are moving them out into the bay and hoping for the best. A little further west, the grocery store shelves are emptying out in Biloxi, Mississippi. People aren't taking any chances with this dangerous storm. And in Key West, which took the brunt of George on Friday, the long process of rebuilding is underway.
In just a few minutes, we'll be taking you live to the Gulf Coast for a report on how preparations are going there. But right now, let's go to Sharon Resulted in the Forecast Center for the latest on the hurricane.
Thanks, Dave and Warren. There certainly is a lot to talk about as we continue to watch this hurricane, and it's a very big hurricane as far as the aerial coverage that we are seeing here across the Gulf of Mexico. And we're finding that some areas are getting some gusts up to tropical storm force winds already. We'll talk more about when those areas might see sustained winds at tropical storm force in just a moment. Let's get you situated, though, with the very latest as of 7 o'clock Central Daylight Time, the latest on George. And there you can see 305 miles to the southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana, and the sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. It's moving to the northwest at 10, central pressure 970 millibars, and you betcha there are some hurricane watches and warnings out, and let's display those for you now so you're able to see exactly who might be affected. Hurricane watches and warnings, and they extend all the way from St. Mark's, the watch, all the way out toward Panama City, and hurricane watches also toward Intracoastal City, out toward Morgan City. In between those areas, from Morgan City to around Panama City, hurricane warnings. And you're wondering, well, gee, what do I do when there's a hurricane warning? There are lots of actions that you can take and should take. First off, prepare for possible evacuation. Make sure that you get your disaster supply kit ready. If you haven't already, you might want to consider getting some of those last-minute items to board up the windows. Maybe get some plywood. Store anchor items that are kept outdoors. And, of course, place all your valuables in waterproof containers as well. A lot to think about this evening, and now that darkness has settled across these areas, well, we think that a lot of folks may have to confine some of those activities that I just mentioned, maybe to things that you can get done inside, and hopefully by morning light, if you haven't taken care of some of the other things, you'll get a chance to. Stu Ostro joins me live now, and let's talk a little bit about how much time folks have to continue to prepare for this if they haven't gotten much accomplished yet.
Not a whole lot of time, Sharon. There still is a window of opportunity through the night, and depending where you are along the coast, there may still be a window of opportunity for a little while after daylight hours commence on Sunday, but things will be going downhill, and the brunt of the hurricane should be coming ashore as we move a little later on into Sunday night and Monday morning.
Okay, you were looking earlier at a few buoys out there in the Gulf of Mexico and finding some tropical storm force winds already.
Yeah, right at the tip here of Louisiana and another one off here. They've been gusting to tropical storm force, still not sustained at 39 or 40 miles per hour, but just a few miles per hour short of that. These stronger winds are underneath these deeper clouds in here, but those stronger winds will progress toward the coast as the hurricane progresses toward the coast.
All right, we've already had some squally weather moving up into the panhandle of Florida and extending out toward Pensacola and Mobile, some very heavy rain and some gusty winds. And again, as each band comes out of away from the center of the hurricane and moves on northward, do we think these winds will get progressively stronger through the night?
They will as these bands come on shore. Fortunately, there's a bit of a break in here now, but we see another one getting close to the coast here, and then it's just about on the southern edge of the screen here that the sustained winds really start to pick up.
What about potential for severe weather in some of those areas tonight?
Yeah, some of these outer squall bands can produce very brief strong wind gusts, conceivably even an isolated tornado or two. And a hurricane does not just produce storm surge, although that's one of the things we fear the most. There can be tornadoes on the outer periphery. You have the winds themselves, which is at 110 miles per hour, can cause a lot of problems. And then last but not least, in this case, since it's a large hurricane and it may be moving fairly slowly once it comes on inland, you have the potential for very heavy rains and rainfall-induced flooding on top of the storm surge flooding.
Okay, well, we do happen to have our crew stationed along the Gulf Coast, and we'll take you first to our own Jim Cantori, who is stationed there in Biloxi, Mississippi. And Jim, what kind of changes have you seen just this evening?
Well, Sharon, about an hour ago, we had a pretty good squall come through here with some heavy rain and wind, and that has basically opened the door now to some sustained winds out of the east at about 10 to 20 miles an hour. So that's what we're getting right now. Occasionally a little spit of drizzle here or there. But a lot of preparations have been made here. People taking this very, very seriously. This is Camille country, and we are only a week removed from Hermine, which was a very weak tropical storm. And people obviously know the difference between Hermine, Camille, and George, which is coming on shore tomorrow and on in toward Monday. So some big problems there. But there's also a fear from some of the public information officers that perhaps some of the people that have moved down here from the north are not quite prepared for the hurricane. And I have a phone number that I want to share with you tonight coming from the Biloxi Civil Defense. That number, if you need information on where to evacuate, where to go, what to bring and whatnot, at least here in Biloxi, is 228-435-6143. So make sure you give those folks a call. And, you know, folks, better be safe than sorry. Looking at our storm cam, that's right behind me here, looking off to the west at Treasure Bay, which is one of the casinos here. This has moved from Camille country to casino country. And again, obviously they've closed those casinos down as of 8 o'clock last night. So the beach, Sharon, which would be packed with people on a Saturday night, is pretty much vacant. Well, another area along the Gulf Coast which is very, very vulnerable to hurricane is New Orleans. And to give us a live report on what's happening there, let's go to Bill Keneally. Bill?
All right, Jim, thanks a lot. Again, here in the city of New Orleans, while it's not deserted, it's not near as crowded as it would typically be on a Saturday night, but nonetheless, there are still a lot of activities going on here in town. I just got off the phone with the Levee Board Police, and they man the hurricane floodgates around the city. They've got 113 of them to operate. They have already shut or closed off, sealed off, if you will, 100 of those floodgates, and they seal off the water from Lake Pontchartrain as well as the Mississippi River. They also man 11 bridges here in the area. Already 6 of those are sandbags, so they will likely be sealing off all the bridges as the day wears on tomorrow. The lakefront itself is fairly protected as we speak. Now, I understand that there's going to be a lot of wind as well, obviously, and I talked to the bridge authority here. There's a major bridge off to my right. They said that they can hold up all the way up to 75-mile-per-hour wind. So we'll see what happens here in the city. It seems like they are well prepared. They know all about hurricanes, with Hurricane Betsy pounding the area 33 years ago in 1965. So that's it for now here from the Big Easy. Let's turn it back to Sharon.
Okay, Bill Keneally, thank you very much. And again, time is...
Life along the central Gulf Coast tonight revolves around Hurricane George as people prepare as best they can. Hello, everyone. I'm Warren Madden. Welcome to this edition of Weather Center.
And I'm Paul Emick. This edition of Weather Center being sponsored by MCI. Big hurricane churn still in the Gulf of Mexico, getting a bit stronger. And people from the Florida Panhandle to the Louisiana Bayou wonder if their cities and towns will be its target. Sandbag walls are going up in New Orleans, hoping to hold back floodwater that should Hurricane George zero in on this area could bring. New Orleans is prone to flooding because of its elevation. Pumping stations are used on a regular basis to help manage rising water. And dorms at the University of New Orleans, which is near Lake Pontchartrain, were being evacuated today just as a precaution. And in Pensacola, Florida, you did your best today to secure the vessels before rough weather began churning up what are now these calm waters. And Biloxi residents were also busy grabbing up supplies today. People all along the central Gulf Coast not taking any chances at all with this dangerous storm.
In just a few minutes, we'll be taking you live to the Gulf Coast for a report on how preparations are going there. But right now, let's go now to Sharon Resulton in the Forecast Center for the latest on Hurricane George.
Thanks, Warren and Paul. Warren and Paul used 2 important words, big and dangerous, and that very well describes our hurricane. A very strong Category 2 and, in fact, almost a Category 3 churning out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Let's go ahead and look at the latest coordinates now with Hurricane George as of 7 o'clock Central Daylight Time. You can see those coordinates if you're plotting at home. It is 305 miles southeast of New Orleans, sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. Moving to the northwest at 10, and the central pressure at 968 millibars. And joining me now to give his expertise is Stu Ostro, meteorology supervisor. You've been watching this, of course, throughout the day, throughout the past several days, because this thing was born in the eastern Atlantic. And boy, we've seen a few changes just in the past several hours. So we've seen a dramatic pressure drop, then a little bit of a rise, and a little bit of a fall again. What sort of things are we looking for as we go into the next several hours?
We'll be watching that central pressure very closely as reported by the hurricane hunters. The pressure in the middle of the hurricane is very closely related to the wind field and the intensity of the wind field. A drop in pressure usually means the hurricane is intensifying. That pressure came down 7 millibars, which is significant during the late afternoon and evening, came back up a couple. Now it's going back down, and the next few hours will be critical. If that pressure continues falling, given what we're seeing on the satellite photos, which is the eye really emerging in the middle of these deep squalls, that would be a sign that the hurricane is in fact intensifying. Even if it doesn't intensify, as you said, it is a big and dangerous hurricane even now.
Let's refresh folks' memories on where the hurricane warnings and watches are, and we remind you that if you are in anywhere along this watch area, we definitely want you to be aware of the fact that you need to be keeping a very close eye on things as we head into the overnight. We keep reiterating this, but time is of the essence here. It's very crucial for folks to be prepared, because as we go through the overnight, there's only going to be a narrow window of time, Stu, right, tomorrow, for folks to really get any final preparations done.
Yeah, tropical storm force winds not too far offshore now, and in gusts in a couple of spots even up in here. And as this continues pressing on shore, once you get into gale force winds that are beginning to increase, it becomes difficult to accomplish preparations, either in terms of trying to hold up a piece of plywood, put it on your window, or escape routes can be cut off. We're already seeing the water start to rise along some of the escape routes of the barrier islands. So people need to rush their preparations to completion, and again, take this seriously. Some folks might have been through Camille or Betsy many years ago, or Opal a little more recently, and can appreciate what a big hurricane and an intense hurricane is all about. But a lot of folks have never experienced a powerful hurricane, and they need to realize that this has the potential to cause a lot of problems in its path.
And a reminder that a hurricane warning, after all, means that hurricane conditions are possible within 24 hours. So that's a very short time period to get a lot of things done if you haven't already started. Let's go ahead and take a look at a radar, because we're already seeing some squally weather encroaching on portions of the Gulf Coast here. And in fact, we've had some pretty gusty winds already, even in areas further inland.
Yeah, some of these squalls came in a little earlier. They're beginning to dissipate. This is the Doppler radar at Tallahassee. We can see the real meat of the hurricane, still a good distance offshore, but not too far. And it looks like right in here, that little curved band right in there is the eye wall on the northern part of the eye of the hurricane. And the fact that this is being seen this far off is pretty impressive. The radar beam, due to the curvature of the Earth, tends to shoot up pretty high that far out. And so it's seeing some very, very high cloud tops, and that's consistent with what we're seeing in the satellite photos, too.
Okay, we do have some showers that are moving on into portions of the Gulf Coast, and indeed, as we showed you there, and New Orleans seeing some of those showers knocking on the door. But we're going to take you on up toward Jim Cantori, who is stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi. You've had some of those squalls moving through, Jim, but it looks pretty calm now.
Yeah, Sharon, it really hasn't been too bad. The only thing that those squalls have done, besides the brief heavy rain and the gusty winds to about 25 miles an hour, is kind of open the door for a more steady wind at about 10 to 15 miles an hour. And that's all we've seen, an occasional spit of rain here or there. But the folks in Biloxi, again, very hurricane savvy, if you will. And it wasn't a week ago today that we were actually seeing Bill Keneally stand in this very spot covering Tropical Storm Hermine. Well, let me show you how serious the folks are taking it here in Biloxi as we take you to earlier on today before the sun went down. Our photographer Blair Carper shot these pictures here. Some of the casinos here obviously closing up and taking this very seriously. All of them are in fact closed. And look at these marinas, absolutely vacant of boats. I mean, they're loaded on a weekend day. And while some youngsters decided to enjoy the wave action from George, some people obviously taking this seriously, boarding up the homes and going to local local supermarkets and getting all the necessary supplies. But as of 8 o'clock tonight, this side of US 90, the beach side, has been completely shut down, mandatory evacuations, and that's pretty much been taken care of since last night, Sharon. A lot of people have left the casinos, and they're pretty much a ghost town here right now. So no doubt this is being taken very seriously, and we don't anticipate too many more problems throughout the night with people not taking it seriously. So good news. I have heard one thing, though. As I look offshore, I saw some lights out there, and we were wondering what they were. And there are actually some shrimp boats out there. Shrimpers have remained offshore, at least some of them, to gather that last feast or harvest, if you will, and they'll be coming in, I would imagine, tonight. But that's it. People taking this very seriously and battening down the hatches. Back to you.
Very good. Thanks. It's good to hear that. Thanks a lot. Jim Cantore, live from Biloxi, Mississippi. And Jim brought up a good point. He talked about Hermine. This is no Hermine. This is much stronger. And in fact, the strongest tropical system we've seen in the Gulf this season.
Yeah, there have been several tropical storms in the Gulf of Mexico, and also Hurricane Earl. And they did, at least a couple of them, caused a lot of problems, so we don't want to minimize those problems. But on the other hand, this has the potential, at least in a portion of the Gulf Coast, to be much worse, and certainly it bears absolutely no resemblance.
Sandbag walls are going up in New Orleans, hoping to hold back floodwater should Hurricane George zero in on the area. New Orleans is prone to flooding because of its low elevation. Pumping stations are used on a regular basis to help manage the rising water. Dormitories at the University of New Orleans near Lake Pontchartrain were being evacuated today as a precaution. And this is a live picture of New Orleans where preparations are underway tonight. The storm is expected to make landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast late tomorrow or Monday. Good evening and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Dave Schwartz. Sharon Resulton has been following the hurricane in the Forecast Center and has the latest. Sharon?
Dave, thank you. Folks, can you believe it? This storm now 11 days old. The birth of George, it's actually a tropical storm, all the way back on September 15th. And now we're dealing with almost a major hurricane. It's Category 2, but a very strong Category 2, and we'll be talking about the prospects for intensification before it makes landfall. We'll talk about that in a moment. First, let's get you up to date on the coordinates as of 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time, centered at 27.3 north, 86.8 west, 275 miles southeast of New Orleans. Sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. It's moving northwest at 10, and the central pressure has dropped again a couple of millibars down to 968 millibars. Let's look at the hurricane watches and warnings. And again, anywhere along the coast here where there's a watch or a warning, you need to really take this seriously. We already have some reports of some voluntary evacuations in some regions. Folks should be just about ready to complete any of the necessary preparations that they have to do for the hurricane, as there will only be a narrow window of time to get those sorts of things done as we head into the day on Sunday. Joining me now live is Stu Ostrew, meteorology supervisor. And Stu, let's talk a little bit about the possibility of intensification with this storm.
The hurricane all evening has seemed like it's trying to intensify. Fortunately, so far, it's been unsuccessful at that. It at times looks a little better organized in the satellite photos. Earlier on, the hurricane hunters reported a very quick pressure drop of about 7 millibars, which is significant, but the bottom line for the moment is that it's holding the status quo. Now, that does not mean that it doesn't have the potential to intensify, because it does, and even if it doesn't intensify, it's still a large and dangerous hurricane that people need to take seriously. Here's the satellite photo that we were talking about, and we do see over the past several hours the eye has become much more visible. Still, though, a little ragged on the southwest side of the eye. These blues in here are indicative of the fact that the deepest squalls have not really completely wrapped around the center. We'll be watching that very closely overnight, and also watching the reports from the hurricane hunters to see whether that pressure in the middle of the hurricane drops any further.
It also looks like a little bit of dry air is trying to work its way in this region as well.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated in here, but just the fact that we have these squalls wrapping around the center, we have some very warm water between the hurricane and the coast, and there's enough organization to the hurricane, enough outflow aloft, which is one thing we look for in a favorable situation, suggests that there is at least the potential for some further strengthening.
Okay, let's talk about some of the effects we've seen already there along the Gulf Coast, and we'll show you a radar here showing you some rain that's moved into the New Orleans area, for instance. And let's take a peek at that, and you can see actually that we have seen a little bit of that rain. Let's actually zoom in a little closer. There we go. In and around New Orleans, some heavier rain has managed to push on in. We do have a live crew stationed in New Orleans, our own Bill Keneally standing by, and you were on the receiving end of some of that heavy rain, weren't you, Bill?
We sure did, Sharon. We caught a squall about an hour ago. We probably had a half an inch of rainfall in about 15 minutes time here. Thankfully, that's blown on by. It's moved on off to our west. we should have some dry hours ahead for the most part. So anybody thinking about evacuating, you should have decent weather. By the way, the Governor Foster, urging and/or suggesting 600,000 people evacuate the New Orleans area, or actually all of eastern Louisiana. Mayor Morial of New Orleans also suggesting the city residents think about evacuating the city. The city pumping system will be put to the test. Evidently, they can handle about an inch per hour or about 8 inches per day. So we'll see how that goes. And also the levee board committee telling me they have 113 hurricane floodgates in operation. They've already closed off 100 of those. They may very well close off the remaining 13 during the daytime on Sunday. So Sharon, everybody's shoring up for the possibility of a major hurricane landfall here in the city of New Orleans. Now let's find out what's happening across the way, about 80 miles east of here in Biloxi. And for that report, we'll go to Jim Cantori. Good evening, Jim.
Hey, good evening to you, Bill. Nice work over there in New Orleans. I'm standing right where Bill was last week for Tropical Storm Hermine moving in. As a matter of fact, Bill was just dealing with the squall that we dealt with about three and a half hours ago. Well, let me show you what it's been like around here in Biloxi today. This is quite a casino territory, and well, it usually is if we don't have a hurricane moving through, but they've pretty much closed all those down. As of 8 o'clock last night, they've been closed. As of 8 o'clock tonight, all the other businesses have been closed down. Here you can see this marina by one casino, which is usually packed on a Saturday, especially a beautiful Saturday like today, and they're pretty much vacant. Well, some kids took advantage of the waves produced by George, others taking things very, very seriously in boarding up, shopping today for all the necessary supplies if, in fact, they were going to evacuate. So no doubt they know the difference between this particular storm, George, and Hermine last week. Now, you'll notice here as we look behind us that we do not have many waves at all tonight. Even though you're going to be faintly seeing those, we don't have a lot of. There's a barrier island out there, or several of them, that kind of block the waves. But don't be fooled. Once the storm really starts kicking in, those waves will bypass the barrier islands, and we could wind up with some very, very high surge here. Other than that, we're battening down the hatches and ready for George to come on in tomorrow and Monday. Back to you, Sharon.
Okay, thanks a lot. Jim Cantori live from Biloxi, Mississippi. Well, Stu, let's talk a little bit about the path now. We have covered the fact that there's a possibility for some intensification. Let's talk about the projected path and maybe a timeline when folks might expect to see conditions deteriorate.
Well, we do have this cone here which indicates the margin of error, if you will, the Hurricane Center's official track somewhere in this direction. People anywhere in the hurricane watch and warning area need to take precautions. That said, it looks like the most likely track is in the general direction of New Orleans for the center of circulation. Folks in New Orleans may wonder, well, we've heard talk of hurricanes before. Is this threat real? The threat is very real, and it looks like conditions will worsen as we go through the day Sunday, and especially Sunday night into Monday. And then there's an indication that the hurricane may slow down as it comes ashore, and if that's the case, we'd have not only an extended period of the storm surge with the Gulf waters rising, but also potentially very heavy flooding rains on top of that.
Folks there saw what Francine did, and this is a much bigger hurricane than Francine.
Yeah, so a wider area could be affected in Louisiana, Mississippi, that part of the world.
Okay, Stu, thank you very much. And a reminder, too, if you're away from your television, you can also reach us online at weather.com. Back to the studio now with Dave.
Well, thanks a lot, Sharon. Aside from the hurricane, it's a pretty benign pattern.